For a homework assignment, my identical twin brother and I once convinced a class, for a very brief moment, that time travel is possible. What are some awesome, hilarious, crazy ideas you've had for a school assignment? In about 7th grade I did the report on Mongolia and decided Mongols were awesome. I made the decision that from that point forwards, every single assignment in any class that I could possibly use Mongolia for subject matter, I would. Over the years I became intensely familiar with the material, and it resulted in drastically reduced time spent on research all the way through graduate school. In my grade 12 law we had to do a presentation, something we had learned in class. I chose to tackle witness statements and their potential unreliability. With the teacher in on it, I had my dad, a cop, burst into the room during a test dressed in street clothes and threatened my teacher. He pretended to be a mechanic who my teacher hadn't paid, and threatened to beat the shit out of him if he didn't get the money by the end of the day. When he left, everyone was wide-eyed and freaked the fuck out. And my teacher told everyone to write down what they saw and what happened. And he left the room pretending to call the police. In the meantime, everyone starts talking about it with each other. Then the teacher came in with my dad and my father explained who he was and looked at all the witness statements. They were all different. From his description, to what he had said, to my teacher's reaction. He then went on to explain police procedure after an incident. How important it is to limit witness exposure to each other and to assure us he would not be beating the shit out of MRX. It was pretty fun to see the looks on the other students' faces. Some were scared shitless, and others looked like they wouldn't mind seeing our teacher get his ass kicked. My buddy was doing his college final on ethics or sociology or some shit. He sent me his PowerPoint and notes to spell check, continuity check, etc etc. It was awful. Like your shit was failing awful. I redid his entire project, with no prior knowledge of the topic. Injecting jokes, I figured this tactic out early on in high school. If you can make the reader or audience laugh or even just smile, they will pay more attention. I worked for 2 solid hours. Redid the whole thing. Fucker got an A on the final. He said his class was shocked that the quiet balding guy that sat in the middle of class for the entire year busted out some intelligible thoughts and left field jokes. His teacher asked him where the hell was that guy all year? You're pretty funny. Apostrophe. In 8th grade I built this kick-ass version of Sherman's March Through the South out of Legos. I made my own fake blood for the little soldiers and everything. The coolest part was making the buildings look burnt using a lighter and sprayed deodorant. For the project, you could say I lit it up since I got an A for it. Come exam time in my grade 11 English class I had a failing grade and the only thing that would pull me above the wire was acing the exam. In Canada our English exams have a theme to them, or at least in my province they do. That year's theme was impact. So in order to show that I understood what kind of an impact things can have, I decided to write a small paragraph as my final paper. Keep in mind these are usually no less than 1,000 word papers, roughly 3-4 pages, and people stress and work their asses off on them. My paper went roughly as follows. Everything we do in life has an impact on something. What I am about to do is going to have an impact on my grades, my future in school and my future beyond school. What I am going to do is finish this paper right now. Double quote. Then I handed it in. I passed grade 11 English that year. When I was a senior in high school, I had to take a humanities class. Our biggest assignment of the year was a 12-page paper that you got to work on with a partner. My best friend and I teamed up and, naturally, didn't start the project until the night before it was due. We began by drinking a bottle of Bacardi 151 proof rum while we worked, thinking it would allow our ideas to flow more freely. The paper, which was modeled after the dialogues between Plato and Socrates, was basically a series of unrelated philosophical questions. It had no real thesis, and glanced on everything from the cave analogy to the meaning of justice. However, instead of making any claims, we would just answer every question with another question. It was so abstract, nonsensical, that our teacher thought we were brilliant. Plato's 151st dialogue earned us an A. We were supposed to write a report about how a work of art related to Hamlet. Most of the kids chose some period piece that directly related to the play. I picked out an abstract painting of inlaid red squares getting progressively darker. I was able to bullshit a good 10 pages out of it. Got an A and the teacher put it on his refrigerator after it spurred a deep conversation with his wife who was an artist. Best assignment I've ever done. My class was doing a simulated Nuremberg trials my senior year of high school. And I got to be the prosecuting attorney. My teacher had told the kid who played Albert Speer that he did something strange during the real trial and that if he figured it out and did it in the simulation he would get extra credit. So, he eventually figured out. Speer asked for water and spat it all over the prosecution. So, in short, I had to stand there in front of class in my best suit and let someone spit water all over me for a grade. The only thing that sticks out in my mind right now is a geometric proof I had to do for a test. My mind was running a blank a few steps in and time was running out. With the rest of my test complete, I took a long shot at it. My proof hinged on the idea that 0/0 equals 1. I knew that it was poor math at best, and stupid at worst. But I had nothing to lose. When I got my test back, I spent 15 minutes arguing that I should get at least partial credit for creativity. I still got 0 credit for the question. In 10th grade I had an entrepreneurship class. The first day we had to think up an idea for a business and write a paragraph on it. I made my business a home crime scene cleanup company located in Ohio. Naturally, I called it the Cleveland Steamer Company. Fast forward to the end of the year and I'm giving a presentation on it to my entire class because my teacher liked it so much on the first day. It was hung in the hallway. The few who understood had many lols. TLDR, named a project after a horrible, depraved sex act and ran with it for a semester. Had to present an argument for an oral presentation class. So I crafted the most emotionally charged but still logically backed argument I could supporting the notion of requiring permission to be parents. I gave the argument. And by the end of it, had fully convinced the class. Or at least those who were paying attention. And then I proceed to end it by turning my argument around and demonstrating how the notion of protecting children is the central point of undermining liberty. Ending with the fake Hitler quote about people sacrificing freedom for the sake of the children. The class was stunned. The teacher, almost laughing. This is mostly just lazy. But I ended up getting an A so I'll post it. I had to write a 2-page paper in 8th grade about Patrick Henry. I typed something up the night before. And it wasn't quite long enough. Rather than write another paragraph, I decided to just do a find and replace in Ms. Word. I found all of the pronouns and changed them to the proper nouns they represented. If I had written his Wikipedia entry using the same method, it would have read like this. Patrick Henry lived during part of the war at Patrick Henry's 10,000 acre, 40 km2, Leatherwood Plantation in Henry County, Virginia, where Patrick Henry's first cousin Ann Winston Carr and Ann Winston Carr's husband Cole, George Waller had settled. 10. During the 5 years Patrick Henry lived at Leatherwood, from 1779 to 1784, Patrick Henry owned 75 slaves and grew tobacco. 11. During this time, Patrick Henry kept in close touch with Patrick Henry's friend the explorer Joseph Martin, whom Patrick Henry had appointed agents to the Cherokee Nation, and with whom Patrick Henry sometimes invested in real estate, and for whom the county seat of Henry County was later named. Double quote. Looking back, I bet my teacher just glanced at the paper, saw a bunch of facts, and slapped an A on it. Not so much an assignment. But I was on a leadership team that helped promote and organize school activities during year 12, senior year high school in Australia. Anyway, my school was a private Catholic school and were organizing the annual swimming carnival. It was a rule that those on the year 12 leadership team has to go all out on their costumes for the swimming carnival, and this year the theme was fantasies and fairy tales. I showed up in a full Jesus costume as a "your religion is a fairy tale. I'm a teenage atheist" heard a statement. I expected to get angry remarks. But the teachers saw the humor in it and I ended up winning the best costume award. I spent the whole day getting photos with people, pushing students into the pool and throwing bread at the teachers. Being Jesus is awesome. I had to do a group presentation about a doll's house in high school English. I was in charge of the writing, and my partner was in charge of making the props poster. For some reason, we decided to make a spider out of paper mache to symbolize some drivel. Problem is, on presentation day, the spider, which was a foot in diameter, ended up getting crushed by the trunkled hinges of my buddy's car. Presentation rolls around and the spider is looking pretty pathetic. Coat hangers are sticking out of the joints. Some of paint peeled off, and it only had one coat of black paint on it. We're presenting, making up stuff on the fly, when all of a sudden, partner gets the idea that the spider represents Torvald's spirit being crushed by the heel of Nora's shoe. Teacher loved it and gave us an A. TLDR. Made a spider for an English project about a doll's house. It got crushed by the trunkled hinges of my buddy's car. So we made up feminist drivel about empowering Nora. I was in AP English as a senior in HS and we were given a creative writing assignment on any topic we wanted to do. A good friend of mine joked about writing a paper from the perspective of the English 401 class, basically senior HS English for people who don't know or care to know about English, but need a grade to graduate. He ended up going with a different idea but was glad to let me run with his. I enlisted the help of a friend in the lower course and used anecdotes from his course. The entire paper was written with terrible phrasing and grammar, and when I got it back the first paragraph was almost entirely read with corrections, before a side note, "Oh, I see what you're doing." Ended up getting an A on the paper. I wish I still had it. Why couldn't Google Docs have been around in 2002? I took a film class in college. We had to write 2 papers. One on a movie we'd seen in class, mostly classics, and one on another film we picked. I thought, well, if I can pick any movie, I'm doing my favorite movie. So of course I picked the greatest film in cinema history, Wayne's World. I came up with an idea of writing on Wayne's ability to shift reality, talking to the camera, the Scooby-Doo ending, etc., and what it means for the themes of the film. But I chicken out. And I decide that I can't just hand in a paper on my impressions of the weirder aspects of Wayne's World. So I go into my prof's office hours and tell him my idea, fully expecting him to tell me that this is a class for real scholarship, etc., etc. As it turns out, his reaction was to tell me that he loved Mike Myers and he thought Wayne's World did a great job of toying with reality. He actually said he was really disappointed that his later movies, this was during the Austin Powers years, didn't do as much of that. I still can't believe my luck. Then he only gave me a B. I still wonder if I wrote a mediocre paper, or if he just had a higher standard since I picked such a fantastic topic. During my sophomore year of college, I took microbiology as a class project. We were to break into groups and make a food that had the similar characteristics of any pathogen. My group chose the beef tapeworm as our pathogen. As the only female in the group, I was elected to make the food. For those of you unfamiliar with a beef tapeworm, when ingested, it attaches to the host's small intestine and feeds on whatever the host eats. As it grows, sections of the worm break off and leave the host's body through defecation. So, with this knowledge, I decided to make chocolate-covered chocolate cake balls, elongated to look like a turd, and put gummy worms inside each ball. Close bracket. In my high school physics class we were set to have a tennis ball launching competition. The team that built the tennis ball launcher with the highest distance to mass ratio would be the winner. Most teams reuse the catapult from the egg drop competition to get a high distance. But my team had the brilliant idea of trying to drastically reduce the mass of the launcher. We ended up building a tiny ramp out of drinking straws. The tennis ball only went a couple of meters. But the launcher was so damn light that our ratio was an order of magnitude higher than the team in second place. Our ratio was so high the teacher keeping score assumed that our recorded score was a clerical error and moved the decimal place over 1. The second place team was congratulated over the intercom the next day. My teacher knew what was up and we got credit for first place. But it was still disappointing to lose out on the recognition. So in 5th grade or so, during class we had a discussion on how to give instructions how to write a how-to. The object was to instruct the other person you were paired with on how to do something simple. My teachers all knew I was both smart and a smartass. And this teacher called me up to demonstrate how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They would give me the instructions and I would do it. The teacher winked at me. And I knew immediately what to do. So the teacher says, "Well, you just take the peanut butter and jelly and you put it on the bread." And I took the unopened bottles of PB&J and put them on top of the unopened loaf of bread. So she says you need to open them first. And I said oops. And then opened them, leaving them where they were. So then she says no. You need to take some of each of the peanut butter and jelly and put them on a slice of bread. Then put the other slice on top, and I said, well, why didn't you say so? And had a stroke of brilliance in which I just shoved my hand into each of the containers and took a giant fistful and smeared them on the bread so they were both dripping with stuff. She facepalms and says you were supposed to use a knife. And I said, well, you should have said so. Double quote. I ended up getting to eat that massive sandwich while everyone else had to do other work because I had so perfectly demonstrated her point on being very detail oriented. Freshman year of college I had to give a commemorative speech in my public speaking class. This could be about a person, holiday, etc. I chose to give a speech about a holiday that someone a year ahead of me in high school had invented for a song. Pimping Hose Day. The guy liked to think he was a rapper. But he was really bad. We're talking Casio keyboard demo with some mumbles bad. This particular song was comedic gold, though. So I got up in front of the class and read off a very carefully worded speech about the oldest profession, talking about the many positive effects on communities and such. I spoke slow and clear, using very proper language, except whenever I needed to refer to pimps or hoes, I used those terms. I also made sure to mention that Pimping Hose Day is celebrated every day, except for Halloween. On Halloween, other people may be dressed as pimps or hoes. And we don't want to get confused, this was seriously discussed in the song. The class was utterly silent throughout the speech. And when I went to sat down, a solid 20 seconds went by before the teacher asked who wanted to go next. After a few more seconds of silence, someone said, "How can you go after that?" Double quote. I rewrote the Divine Comedy so it was about old Nickelodeon cartoon characters instead of Renaissance era public figures that no one knows of before reading the footnotes. My story was complete with different kinds of detention instead of different circles of hell, different extracurriculars for different rings of purgatory, and different playground equipment for recess instead of spheres in heaven. I wish I still had a copy of it. Hello Reddit. I'm the other half my bro is referring to. To add a little context, this was for a professor who was notorious at making students cry by telling them how awful their ideas are. Very rare does the guy give out A's, let alone even smile. This was one of the first assignments I had with him. So nobody knew I was a twin and I had no clue if the teacher would get pissed at me for making a mockery of his assignment. Fortunately it all worked out. Got an A on the assignment and an A in the class at the end of the semester. Thanks for helping out, bro. Not that awesome. But enough years have gone by that I consider this story hilarious, although it was relatively scarring at the time. In 2nd grade, I had to give a report on Mozart. Skimmed an article on Encarta, remember when that was a thing? And wrote this inventive speech on his life. It said he'd been married. And also that he became very close to this Johann Christian character. Didn't realize Johann was a boy's name. And extrapolated their relationship to marriage. I figured nobody would know better anyway and my teacher would be impressed by all the clearly extensive research I'd done. False. I accidentally taught my 2nd grade class that Mozart married Bach. My mom, a teacher, brings it up to this day. In high school, we read Lord of the Flies in English one year. Our final project with the book was to recreate the novel, using our class list as a cast. I decided to go the journal route, as I am absolute crap at third-person storytelling. But I can rattle off experiences for hours. This thread. Case in point. I wrote about who died in the airplane crash, who split into cliques, and why I remained carefully neutral. Someone had to document what was going on out on this godforsaken island. I drew maps. I documented deaths. I started in pen. I switched to a pencil. Then a Sharpie. You see, my supplies were being stolen from my shelter by the other kids. Then came my creative genius moment. About 3/4 through my tale, I took the pages outside and burned through them in strategic spots. I have never had so much fun purposefully destroying something I was going to hand in. The final page was typewritten, as I, of course, was among the survivors that were finally rescued. The teacher, most of the school considered her strict, to put it nicely, loved it. Loved it. She even thanked me for letting her die peacefully. On the subject of identical twins, I had a classmate who was a twin. She was totally gung-ho about schooling. Always did her work. Never late. Etc. You know the type. Well, one day, class is proceeding like normal, when suddenly her twin walks in the door, and my classmate gets up, waves bye to the teacher and leaves. And the twin takes her place. Turns out that wasn't my classmate after all, but her twin. What had happened was that my classmate had a doctor's appointment, but didn't want miss her perfect attendance. So she had her sister, who didn't care that much about class, fill in for her and switch. The teacher was much too impressed by the ruse to do anything about it. In a social studies class in grade 11 we were studying propaganda. And in groups of 4 we had to make a propaganda presentation persuading the class about a topic. We chose lowering the legal drinking age to 15. We did the first part of our presentation normally, skewed graphs, stats, antecedential evidence, fake experts, etc. To finally hammer the point home we asked the students how many have drank alcohol. Of course nobody put up their hand because the teacher was there. It was an honors class. So we asked the teacher to leave the room momentarily, which he did. We asked the question again and all but 4 kids put up their hands. So we then asked those kids if they would like to change that. And under peer pressure they all said yes. We then cracked open a beer we were using as a prop for the presentation. Took out 4 cups and poured them some beer, which they drank. We cleaned thing up and asked the teacher to come back in. When we asked the question again every kid put up their hands. And we said what's the point of drinking laws if every kid has drank alcohol already? 100% grade. TL. Doctor gave kids beer in class. During my college days I was taking some sort of GE computer class. During the course we were assigned a group project. My group was assigned the topic of children and the internet. And my individual portion was regarding safety. This was back in about 2000 or so, which will be important later. So for my part of the presentation I decided to do a small social experiment. I set up a couple of Yahoo chat accounts, back when that was a thing people used, as a 12-year-old. I had male and female accounts. So I would go into a general chat room and wait. When child predators would IM me I would take screenshots of all the vile things they said. All those screenshots were compiled into an awesome graphic for my presentation. It was a long time ago. And I don't have it any longer. So I did the presentation. It was a huge success. And I got an A. Now here is where it gets good. As I was chatting with these pedophiles they would want pictures. Usually I would just say that I didn't have a camera. Remember this was 2000 so that wasn't unusual. But at some point I got bored and asked one of them what do I get if I send you pictures. He told me to check my Yahoo email. So I go into my email and I shit you not. There is a $50 gift certificate to Amazon.com. So naturally I went to Glamour Shots or other websites, downloaded the pics and sent them. They were all totally G-rated and SFW. I realized that I may be onto something. I am too much of a pussy to go all Boondock Saints on these assholes. But I was willing to scam the shit out of them. So for the next couple of years, whenever I was bored, I would go online and make some money. I would estimate that I made about $500 or so off these guys and built quite a nice DVD collection. But Chris Hansen and the proliferation of cheap web digital cameras put an end to all that. TL. Doctor, I used to have a hobby of scamming child predators. In 7th grade, my best friend and I were teamed up with a girl we didn't know very well for an in-class assignment. Our assignment was to be about pioneer settlers moving to the west and writing to our friends back east to tell them the differences and what we liked about living out west. Our paper completely revolved around meeting up with a new friend in the west named Mike Hunt. We played with Mike Hunt. We ate with Mike Hunt. We did everything possible and enjoyed doing it thoroughly with Mike Hunt. We talked the girl into going in front of the class and giving a 5-minute oral presentation on how much she liked playing with my Mike Hunt. This was the pinnacle of my middle school career. Last year, JR year of high school, we had just finished reading the book The Things They Carried. And our final was to write a letter to someone about something we carried and how it impacted us. So I, being a smartass and knowing my teacher was cool, decided to write the entire paper in Ebonics. As a satire of the assignment itself. The first line was something along the lines of "Dog I be carrying our bank in my pocket." I got an A. And the teacher said it was one of the funniest things anyone had ever turned in. I can look for and post the whole thing if anyone wants to read it. In my world history class in high school, my best friend and I were paired up and chosen to present on the Phoenicians. All we really could gather on them at the time was that they did some stuff with the alphabet, dug the color purple, and worshipped cats. My friend and I took the opportunity to make a video of her cat doing various godly things, think flying, defeating a serpent, etc., while we wore homemade togas out of bed sheets. Got an A. For my world lit class in high school, we got to do a lot of really fun projects, making food, art, that kind of stuff. One time we had to do a project for Don Quixote. And one of the things we could do was rewrite the lyrics to a song to make it about Don Quixote and perform it for the class. Naturally, I picked Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm sure the lyrics I wrote are on a flash drive somewhere, but I can't remember most of them. I'm afraid. I'm a knight errant, I need no sympathy, sanity's easy come, easy go, little high, little low, anyway my horse goes is the way to find adventure for me. For me. I brought a Guitar Hero guitar with me and pretended to rock out during the solos. I heard the pictures made it into our yearbook, but I never saw them. I'm not sure I want to. In middle school we had to read a book a week and write about it and then present it. I hated reading. So what I decided to do was just find a lesser known book, sci-fi or fantasy, read the back and then just made up stories based on that. I'd make up characters, plots and adventures, and the teacher never looked into the books I talked about. I got an A in the class and was put into advanced English the following year and all throughout high school. Close bracket. In our JR, high athletics were a blast. But during off-season basketball and football you were forced to join the track team or join an off-season training. Both sucked, so a few days 2 other guys and I decided to skip 7-period off-season training. We figured the best place to hide was in plain sight. So we hid in a teacher's room which doubled as a science lab since it was so big. Everything went well for a week. We'd come in, sit behind a lab table for 55 minutes, then casually walk out. All until the day the science teacher came in to grade tests. We were screwed. Whispering for a few moments, we came up with the bold plan to jump up and say, "Surprise! Happy birthday!" Double quote. It worked. Her birthday was 2 weeks away and we had no idea. She thanked us and gave us a big hug. Not me, but my sophomore English teacher. He was accepted into the honors program at his college. So a lot of times he took courses that were supposed to be rather difficult. He walked into the lecture hall where his philosophy final was to be held to see a chair poised in front of the chalkboard. His teacher announced to the class, "Prove to me that this chair does not exist. You have 2 hours." Almost immediately, every student was ferociously writing. Except my teacher. He wrote for about 10 seconds. Smiled. Then handed in his paper in front of his rather stunned classmates. He got an A. His answer? What chair? Double quote. I wrote my college entrance essay about the most influential person in my life. Mario. I discussed how Super Mario Bros. Got me into video games, which got me into computers and technology. I was applying to an engineering program. I mentioned how playing co-op helped me learn to get along with my little brother. And I discussed how Mario faces obstacles and keeps going after failure, even if he has to start over at the beginning. My English teacher gave me an A. And I got into college.